So you gotta go to steam-engine.org/wirewizard to find the TFR values for the chip in order to temp control other types of wires or hybrid wires. So in the wire builder, you can select the different types of wire that you want to use. Single, parallel, twisted, Clapton. For today's example, we'll say we're going with Clapton. So on the different wires that you can temp control, here's just a small list of what the values that they have here. And let's just, for example's sake, say that we're using Kenthal for the core. 30 gauge is a little bit small to be comfortably wrapping around, so let's just say that's 28. And I like to use nickel because it's fairly accurate and the TFR curve is going to give us the best data. And the nickel that I typically use is probably like a 32 gauge. So over here, if you go up to the table, you can find the results for the temperature factors of resistivity. So up here you have the temperature, and then you got the factor of resistivity right here. So at 100 degrees Celsius you got 1.08, at 150 is 1.13, 200, 1.16, 250, 1.20, 300, 1.23. And you might be wondering, some of these numbers might be pretty close to rounding up to 0.7. You can round up or down, and just be aware when you're hitting the higher temperature limits, for example 480 degrees, con does start to brown a little bit under that, but you're gonna get a straight burn hit closer to 500. So here you might want to be a little bit more conservative and say just stay with 1.20 instead of 1.21. So it runs a little bit on the cooler side. By bumping that to 1.21, it's going to run hotter and you have a higher risk of burning your con. But you do have it hit harder at this higher temperature. So it's really based on personal preference. And for a little bit more advanced and customizable features to get more accurate, you got the inner diameter, and what that is the rod or screwdriver that you might be wrapping your coil around. I like to use bigger diameter, so let's just say 3 millimeter on here, and number of wraps 8 sounds about good. The legs, 5 millimeters is pretty long. On temp control you want shorter legs so it doesn't so you don't get any hot legs. It won't be very accurate, so about 1 millimeter to 0.5 is about right if you have the coils right up against the post. Wire spacing, you're going to be looking at closer to a 0.1 millimeter or a 0.2 in terms of wire spacing, and that's basically the gap of the wire, so it doesn't short out and you want to have a slight gap. So around 0.2 is going to give you the highest accuracy, and that looks about good. Oh, I have to mention this. So Kenthal and nickel. So nickel is the material that changes in resistance as the temperature goes up, and Kenthal really doesn't move. So if you feel that it's not temp controlling properly or as accurate, what you can do is actually make the wire smaller by going up a gauge in the Kenthal, and you can see these figures go up. So let's just bump that down to 28 gauge. So you see that number at 100 is 1.08, and that's 1.13. The higher the number, the more accurate your temp control is going to be. So if we go to a smaller wire on the Kenthal, you see that bump up to 1.17 and 1.28. Another way to do it is by using a nickel wire, using a thicker gauge nickel versus the Kenthal, or the resistance wire versus non-resistance. So let's go to a bigger wire at 30 gauge. At 100 degrees Celsius, from 1.17 is bumped up to 1.25. So the more of the nickel, or say if you use titanium, the bigger the wire of that versus the Kenthal or the resistance wire, the bigger the ratio, the smaller the ratio, the better. So as you can see, by playing with that, you can get higher levels of temp control accuracy.